The fortune teller's words hung in the air like smoke, thick, suffocating, impossible to wave away. He will kill again. My laugh caught in my throat as she spoke my husband's name with such certainty. Daniel. How did she even know his name? I hadn't mentioned it. I'd barely said anything at all. I left $20 on her table and stumbled out into the Michigan afternoon, the spring air suddenly too cold against my skin. My friends were waiting at the coffee shop down the street, ready to laugh about my impromptu visit to Madame Zaraya's. It was supposed to be a joke, a silly tourist thing while visiting my college roommate in Ann Arbor. Something to laugh about over our lattes. But I couldn't laugh anymore. 3 weeks earlier, Daniel had kissed me goodbye at the airport, his blue eyes crinkling at the corners the way they always did when he smiled. "Have fun with the girls," he'd said, handing me my carry-on. "Don't do anything I wouldn't do." Then he winked and squeezed my hand, his wedding band catching the fluorescent airport light. We'd been married for 7 years, 7 mostly happy years filled with Sunday morning pancakes, Netflix debates, and planning for the future. Daniel was an architect, respected, meticulous, thoughtful, the kind of man who remembered anniversaries and took care of the neighbor's cat when they went on vacation, the kind of man everyone trusted, everyone including me. I still remember the day we met. I was carrying too many grocery bags up to my apartment, struggling with the door, when he appeared beside me. "Need a hand?" he asked, and I looked up into those blue eyes for the first time. There was kindness there, I thought. Kindness and something else I couldn't name, a quiet intensity that made my heart beat faster. He helped me with my groceries, and when I offered him a thank you coffee, he accepted with a smile that lit up his whole face. 6 months later, we were engaged. A year after that, married. And now, 7 years in, I thought I knew everything about him. But as I sat in that dimly lit room across from a woman who called herself Madame Zaraya, I realized maybe I didn't know him at all. "Your husband," she had said, her accent thick but her eyes sharp as she studied my palm. "Daniel." Then she frowned, her fingers tightening around my wrist. "He has darkness in him. Old darkness. He will kill again." "Excuse me?" I'd pulled my hand away, forcing a laugh. "I think you've got the wrong reading." But she shook her head slowly, her silver earrings catching the candlelight. "I don't make mistakes about such things. Be careful, Rebecca. Look into his past. There are answers in Colorado." Colorado, where Daniel had lived before moving to Michigan and meeting me, where his ex-wife had lived, the one he rarely spoke about. "So?" Lisa's voice snapped me back to the present as I slid into the booth at the cafe. "Was it amazing? Did she tell you you're going to win the lottery or meet a tall, dark stranger?" She wiggled her eyebrows suggestively. I forced a smile, wrapping my cold fingers around the mug of coffee waiting for me. "No, nothing like that. Just the usual vague predictions. Not worth the $20. Jen leaned forward, her reporter's instincts clearly sensing a story. "You look pale, Beck. What did she really say?" I shook my head and took a sip of coffee. "Nothing. It was stupid. I don't believe in that stuff anyway." But later that night, alone in my hotel room while Lisa and Jen slept off our wine-fueled dinner, I opened my laptop and typed into the search bar, "Daniel Mercer, Colorado." Nothing unusual came up: his old architecture firm, a few project mentions in local newspapers, a photo from a charity golf tournament. My finger hovered over the keyboard, then I typed, "Daniel Mercer, Colorado wife." The results loaded, and my stomach dropped. There she was, Catherine Mercer, née Wilson, blonde and beautiful, smiling beside Daniel in what appeared to be a Christmas party photo from 2011. I clicked on the image, which led to an article from the Denver Post dated January 2014. "Local woman still missing after 3 months, police appeal for information." The room seemed to tilt as I read the article. Catherine Mercer, 32, had disappeared in October 2013. Last seen leaving her office on a Friday evening. Her car found in the parking lot. No signs of struggle. No witnesses. Her husband, Daniel Mercer, reported her missing when she didn't come home. I scrolled through more search results with shaking hands. Search for missing woman continues into second month. Husband of missing woman pleads for information. Investigation into disappearance goes cold. And then, from August 2014, husband of missing woman relocates to Michigan. I closed the laptop, my mind racing. Daniel had told me his marriage ended because they wanted different things. He wanted children, she didn't. It was amicable but sad. He never mentioned that she had vanished without a trace. But that didn't mean... It couldn't mean... I picked up my phone and scrolled through recent photos. There was Daniel at Christmas, carving the turkey. Daniel and our dog, Scout, playing in the snow. Daniel fixing the leaky faucet in our bathroom, his forehead creased in concentration. Normal, everyday moments. The life of a normal, everyday man. Not a killer. The fortune teller was crazy. She'd probably Googled me before I arrived, found out who my husband was. It was a scam, meant to scare me into coming back for more readings, more money. Still, I couldn't sleep that night, and when I finally did drift off near dawn, I dreamed of Daniel's hands, his strong, capable architect's hands, wrapped around someone's throat. "You're quiet," Daniel said 3 days later as we drove home from the airport. Bad trip? I glanced at his profile, at the face I'd woken up to for 7 years. No, it was great, just tired. He reached over and squeezed my knee. "Glad you're home. The house is too empty without you." I smiled and placed my hand over his, feeling the familiar warmth of his skin. This was Daniel, my Daniel. The man who brought me tea when I was sick and remembered exactly how I liked my eggs. The man who cried during sad movies and sang off-key in the shower. Not a man who could kill. But that night, after he'd fallen asleep, I slipped out of bed and went to the spare room where we kept the filing cabinets. Daniel was organized to a fault. Every important document labeled and filed away. Tax returns, insurance policies. His life before me was tucked into a folder labeled Pre-2014. Inside were his college diplomas, previous employment records, divorce papers from Catherine, filed in absentia after she'd been missing for a year. There were a few photos, too. Daniel and Catherine on their wedding day. Daniel standing in front of a house I didn't recognize. Their house in Colorado, I assumed. And at the back of the folder, a small newspaper clipping about a woman named Jennifer Lawson. "Local teacher remembered at memorial service," the headline read. Jennifer Lawson, 29, had apparently drowned during a camping trip 5 years before Daniel met Catherine. According to the article, she and her boyfriend had been camping near a lake when she went swimming alone and never returned. The boyfriend wasn't named in the article. I put everything back exactly as I found it and returned to bed, where Daniel slept peacefully, one arm flung across my empty side of the mattress. I lay down beside him, wide awake, studying his face in the dim light from the street lamp outside our window. Who was Jennifer Lawson to my husband? And was her drowning really an accident? The next morning, I called in sick to work. As soon as Daniel left for his office, I went back to the filing cabinet and took photos of everything in the pre-2014 folder with my phone. Then I drove to the public library 2 towns over, where nobody knew me, and sat down at a computer. I searched for Jennifer Lawson and found her obituary from 2008. She had been a kindergarten teacher in Boulder, Colorado. Beloved by her students, active in her church, survived by her parents and a younger sister. After an hour of searching through archived news articles, I found what I was looking for, a small mention in a local paper about the drowning investigation being closed. The article named Daniel Mercer as Jennifer's boyfriend at the time of her death. My hands were trembling as I kept searching. Jennifer Lawson and Daniel Mercer and Catherine Wilson, 2 women, now both gone. He will kill again. Over the next few weeks, I became a detective in my own home. I examined our life together with new eyes, looking for signs I might have missed. Daniel was always so methodical, so careful. His architectural drawings were perfect down to the millimeter. Our house was immaculate, everything in its place. Even the garden shed was organized with military precision, tools hanging on labeled hooks, supplies neatly shelved. The shed. Something about it had always bothered me, though I'd never quite put my finger on what. It was larger than we needed for our small yard, and Daniel was particular about it. He kept it locked. Expensive tools, he'd explained when I asked. And you know how break-ins have been increasing in the neighborhood. One rainy Tuesday while Daniel was at work, I found myself standing outside the shed, staring at the padlock. I didn't have a key, had never needed one since gardening was Daniel's thing. But now I needed, to see inside. I called a locksmith, claiming I'd lost my key. It cost me $150, but 20 minutes later I was standing alone in the shed, the new key heavy in my palm. At first glance, everything seemed normal. Garden tools, bags of soil and fertilizer, a workbench with neatly arranged screwdrivers and wrenches, a riding lawnmower for our modest lawn, a bit excessive, but Daniel said it was worth the investment. I ran my hand along the wooden wall panels, not sure what I was looking for until my fingers caught on something, a seam where there shouldn't be one, a panel that moved slightly when I pressed it. My heart pounding, I pushed harder and the panel slid to the side, revealing a small hidden compartment. Inside was a metal box, locked with a tiny key I didn't have. But a determined woman with a hammer doesn't need a key. Inside the box was a collection of items that made no sense at first glance. A silver charm bracelet, a driver's license belonging to Catherine Mercer, a USB drive, and underneath it all, a small leather-bound journal. I flipped it open with shaking hands. It was Daniel's handwriting, but the words on the page made my blood run cold. C is asking too many questions about Jay. Says she found the bracelet, becoming a problem. There were more entries, short, cryptic notes spanning several years. I sat on the floor of the shed, rain drumming on the roof, and read every word. The journal didn't contain explicit confessions, but the implications were clear. Jennifer's drowning hadn't been an accident, and Catherine hadn't simply disappeared. The last entry was dated October 11, 2013, the day before Catherine went missing. Tomorrow it ends, then Michigan, fresh start. That night, I watched Daniel move around our kitchen, preparing dinner as he did every Tuesday. Chicken parmesan, my favorite. He hummed as he worked, occasionally glancing over to smile at me. You feeling better? You've been quiet lately. He sprinkled cheese over the chicken, his movements precise. I nodded, taking a sip of the wine he'd poured me. Just stressed with work. Well, I'm thinking we could use a vacation. Maybe head up to the lake house next month? Just the two of us? He slid the baking dish into the oven and set the timer. No distractions, like the old days. Our lake house, isolated, on a deep, cold lake. Sounds perfect, I said, forcing a smile. Later, after Daniel had fallen asleep, I quietly packed a bag. I took the journal, the USB drive, and Catherine's driver's license. I wrote a note saying I'd been called away on an emergency work trip. Then I slipped out to my car and drove straight to the police station. Detective Harlow was a woman in her 50s with tired eyes and a no-nonsense attitude. She listened without interruption as I laid out everything I'd discovered: the fortune-teller's warning, Jennifer's drowning, Catherine's disappearance, the hidden compartment in the shed. So let me get this straight, she said when I finished. You went to a fortune-teller who told you your husband is a killer, and now you're convinced he's murdered 2 women? Put that way, it sounded ridiculous. I pushed the journal across the desk. Read it yourself. She flipped through the pages, her expression unreadable. These notes are vague. It could mean anything. What about Catherine's license? Why would he keep that if she just left him? People keep strange mementos from failed relationships, she said, but she was studying the license carefully. And you said there's a USB drive? I nodded and handed it over. She plugged it into her computer and clicked through the files, dozens of photographs of Catherine. Catherine sleeping, Catherine at work taken from a distance, Catherine arguing with Daniel, unaware she was being photographed. Detective Harlow's expression changed. Wait here, she said, and left the room with the drive. When she returned 30 minutes later, her face was grim. We're going to bring your husband in for questioning. The investigation took months. They found Catherine's remains buried near a hiking trail outside Denver. Dental records confirmed her identity. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. They reopened the investigation into Jennifer Lawson's drowning and discovered evidence that had been overlooked. Bruising patterns inconsistent with an accidental drowning, a witness who'd recanted their statement after speaking with Daniel. Throughout it all, I lived in a hotel under a different name, looking over my shoulder, jumping at shadows. Daniel was held without bail, considered a flight risk. He never tried to contact me, not once. The trial was a media sensation. Architect of death, the tabloids called him. Evidence mounted, the journal, the photographs, forensic findings. Former colleagues came forward describing strange behavior, cold responses to questions about his missing wife. I testified, describing our life together, the hidden compartment, the fortune teller's warning that had started it all. On cross-examination, Daniel's attorney tried to paint me as unstable, suggesting I'd fabricated evidence out of paranoia or jealousy. And this whole investigation began because a fortune teller told you your husband was a killer? He asked skeptically. No, I replied, looking directly at Daniel for the first time in months. It began because she knew his name without me telling her, and something about that made me pay attention to things I'd been ignoring. Daniel's face remained impassive, those blue eyes I once thought were kind now empty of emotion as they met mine. The jury deliberated for just 6 hours before finding him guilty on 2 counts of first-degree murder. That was 18 months ago. Daniel is serving 2 consecutive life sentences with no possibility of parole. I've moved to a new state, changed my name, started over. Some days I can go hours without thinking about him. But I'll never forget the look on his face when the verdict was read, not anger or despair, but a cold calculation. Like he was already thinking ahead to the next move, the next game. Sometimes I wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, wondering what might have happened if I hadn't gone to that fortune teller on a whim, if I hadn't heard the warning, he will kill again. Would I have been next? I found out later that the fortune teller, Madame Zoraya, had died 3 days after our meeting. A stroke, according to the news. I never got to thank her, or ask her how she knew. Now I live alone in a small apartment with a security system and 3 locks on the door. I've started a support group for families of victims and survivors of domestic violence. I speak at conferences about hidden signs of abuse, about trusting your instincts. Last week I received a letter forwarded through my attorney. The handwriting was familiar, neat and precise. Daniel's handwriting. I haven't opened it. It sits in my desk drawer like a time bomb. Some truths are better left unread, some fortunes better left untold. But sometimes the warning comes just in time. If you've ever felt that chill of doubt, that whisper of unease about someone close to you, don't ignore it. Don't dismiss it as paranoia or overthinking. Look deeper. Ask questions. Because sometimes the people who hide the darkest secrets are the ones who seem the most normal. The ones who sleep beside every night, never suspecting that behind their smile lies a monster. The ones who would have killed again. If this story resonated with you or reminded you of someone you know who might be in danger, please reach out. Trust your instincts. And remember that help is available. You are not alone.